afflicted Bani Israel was they could not just accept to listen to what was told to them and obey it. They asked Musa alayhi salam a series of questions. Right? This story happened. How did it happen? This person was murdered in private. And they came to Musa alayhi salam to ask him, what should they do? Who was the murderer? Who can we hold accountable for committing this crime? So Allah Azza wa Jal told Musa alayhi salam to tell them to sacrifice a cow. وإذ قال موسى لقومه إن الله يأمركم أن تذبحوا بقرة. Allah orders you to sacrifice a cow. Now, the trial here is, when you think about things outwardly, what on earth does sacrificing a cow have to do with finding the identity of a murderer? It has nothing to do with it. But the wisdom here is that oftentimes our minds cannot comprehend the wisdom behind some teaching in Islam. And we might, and of course, al-insan adu ma yajhal. The human being antagonizes that which he can't understand. So the automatic reaction to not being able to fully understand the wisdom behind what I'm being told is to reject. So that's what Bani Israel began to do. What did they say? قَالُوا أَتَتَّخِذُنَا هُزُوًا. Are you joking around with us? Are you making fun of us? Are you trying to make a fool out of us? Are you trying to make fools out of us? قَالَ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ أَنْ أَكُونَ مِنَ الْجَاهِلِينَ. He said, أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ. How on earth can you speak to me as one of the greatest prophets of Allah Azza wa Jal in such a way? That Prophet Musa alayhi salam, who's from Ulul Azm, is going to be someone who takes the signs of Allah Azza wa Jal as mockery? How? أَتَتَّخِذُنَا هُزُوًا قَالَ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ أَنْ أَكُونَ مِنَ الْجَاهِلِينَ. It didn't stop there. Okay. They began taking it as huzwa and mockery. Right? They began taking it as huzwa and mockery. قَالُوا ادْعُ لَنَا رَبَّكَ يُبَيِّنْ لَنَا مَا هِي. Tell your Lord to show us this cow that you want us to sacrifice. Look at the disrespect. The thing here is, so there's a difference between not understanding and there's a difference and between being arrogant against the command of Allah Azza wa Jal. And this is exactly the disease they had. Yeah, sure, they didn't understand, but that didn't stop there. What did they say? Ud'u lana rabbak. Call upon your Lord to show us where this cow is. And then they didn't stop there. Because they began being difficult, Allah Azza wa Jal wanted to teach them a lesson. Description after description, the difficulty of finding this cow became even more and more unattainable. Right? This cow is one that grazes in open pastures. Right? This cow is of a yellow color. قَالُوا ادْعُ لَنَا رَبَّكَ يُبَيِّنْ لَنَا مَا لَوْنُهَا. Tell us the color of this cow. You want to know the color? It is بَقَرَةٌ صَفْرَاءُ فَاقِعُ لَوْنُهَا تَسُرُّ النَّاظِرِينَ. It's bright yellow. You want to know a color for this cow? Bright yellow. Right? All right? Then he said, قَالُوا ادْعُ لَنَا رَبَّكَ يُبَيِّنْ لَنَا مَا هِي إِنَّ الْبَقَرَةَ تَشَابَهَ عَلَيْنَا وَإِنَّا إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَمُهْتَدُونَ. After they asked a few questions, they said, just tell Allah, tell your Lord to show us which of these baqaras, which of these cows do we need to sacrifice. Because we don't know how to find this cow, and we hope that we'll be guided to it, right? And then they saw the sign, and in the end, Allah Azza wa Jalla, they sacrificed the cow. And what was the miracle? Verse 73 tells you what happened. فَقُلْنَا اضْرِبُوهُ بِبَعْضِهَا كَذَلِكَ يُحْيِي اللَّهُ الْمَوْتَى. Right? This deceased man who was killed was brought back by a miracle. He was brought back through the sacrifice of this cow, and he said when he was resurrected, قَاتِلِي فُلَان. The man was resurrected. It wasn't the cow that spoke. It was the man. But Allah wanted to teach them a lesson through the cow. In sama' and ta'a, listening and obeying. So they sacrificed, and then he said, Qatili fulan, the one who killed me is so and so, and then he was deceased once again. He just came back to say this. And then after this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَذَلِكَ يُحْيِي اللَّهُ الْمَوْتَى وَيُرِيكُمْ آيَاتِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. Allah resurrects the lifeless, those who passed away. You just saw it in front of your eyes. Now what are you going to do with this? Then Allah Azza wa Jal tells us, instead of this inspiring them, now this teaches us something. Sometimes it's not about seeing signs. It's about the heart being in the right place. Look at another verse of the Quran. What does it say? وَلَوْ أَنَّنَا نَزَّلْنَا إِلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَ وَكَلَّمَهُ الْمَوْتَى وَحَشَرْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ قُبُلًا مَا كَانُوا لِيُؤْمِنُوا. If we were to show them every sign, if we were to send down the angels to them, if the dead were to speak to them, and if they were to see everything with their own eyes, they would not believe. Why? There's something wrong with their hearts. مَا كَانُوا لِيُؤْمِنُوا إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. There's something wrong with their hearts, and that's why they're not believing. So after seeing this ayah min ayatillah azza wa jal, instead of becoming better for it, they actually became worse. ثُمَّ قَسَتْ قُلُوبُكُم مِّن بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ فَهِيَ كَالْحِجَارَةِ أَوْ أَشَدُّ قَسْوَةً. And then the description here goes to elaborately describe how their hearts were even more rigid than rocks. Right? Here, look what he says here. هذه الآية ضرب الله القسوة في هذه الآية ضرب الله القسوة المادية في الحجارة مثلا للقسوة المعنوية في قلوب المخاطبين. This is Allah Azza wa Jalla is giving an example to how turned off Bani Israel were spiritually. If you were to compare their hearts to rocks, you would find that their hearts were even more rigid and tough than the rocks themselves. فإذا قارنا بين القلوب ووجدنا منها ما هو هين لين سهل الاستجابة للحق ولمواعظ الهداية ودعوة الخير ومنها ما هو أخف لينا ومنها ما هو قاس ومنها ما هو أشد قسوة. In this parable, Allah is giving us something to reflect on. Not all hearts are the same, spiritually speaking. And what enables someone to accept truth or reject it is the condition of the heart. There are those hearts that are very soft and tender, right? The Prophet ﷺ, when he describes the mu'min, he says, Al-mu'min hayyinun layyinun alifun yu'laf. You want to know the hallmark of Iman? Prophet ﷺ says, the believer is easy, the believer is flexible, the believer is very amicable, easy to get along with, and he gets along with everybody. This is a sign of Iman. The Prophet ﷺ, he actually describes the people of Jannah. He asks the companions, هل أخبركم بأهل الجنة? Do you want to know who the people of Jannah are? Prophet ﷺ said to them, كل ضعيف متضعف لو أقسم على الله لأبره. The people of Jannah are a people who are of a very humble demeanor. And what does ضعف here mean? It doesn't mean weakness. ضعيف means weak, right? But here, ضعيف متضعف, what the Prophet ﷺ is trying to say is they are very, very humbled by circumstance, by life. They're not tough and rough around the edges. They're not injurious. They're not people of adha and harm. You find that nifaq, hypocrisy, and harm go hand in hand. And you find iman and nafa', Iman and benefit and goodness go hand in hand. The more I have an affinity to afflict harm on people, that's a sign that there's no Iman here. Someone who can easily injure people and is not fazed by doing so is someone who their Iman is in a very difficult, perilous state. This is what we learn from this ayah, right? ثُمَّ قَسَتْ قُلُوبُكُم مِّن بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ فَهِيَ كَالْحِجَارَةِ أو أشد قسوة. Right? And then the Prophet, the Quran tells us, hey, look, you will see signs in your life. What is the condition of your heart? There are hearts that are soft and easy. And there are hearts that are very rigid. Those hearts that are very rough and rigid are closest to hellfire. The Prophet ﷺ goes on to in that hadith that I told you guys, هل أخبركم بأهل النار? You want to know who the people of hellfire are? Prophet ﷺ said in that hadith, كل عتل جواظ مستكبر. Prophet ﷺ said, the people of hellfire are a people of aggression, people of arrogance, and people of pride. That's the people of hellfire, right? These sifat these characteristics are the ones that drag the person down the path to rejection, right? It's very interesting. Allah Azza wa Jal is teaching us through what? If this through what? What we profoundly understand through this story about Bani Israel is what makes people good, what makes them wicked, are characteristics that are in their heart. It's not their skin color, it's not their blood, it's not their affiliations. No. Allah Azza wa Jal dispels a notion in Surat Al Baqarah. Right? What is this? He says, يا بني إسرائيل اذكروا نعمتي التي أنعمت عليكم وأني فضلتكم على العالمين. Oh Bani Israel, I've given you favor over the worlds. Right? What is this favor? Not because of their blood, because of prophethood that was among them. Right? Not because of their blood. They weren't favored because of their bloods and their blood and their bloodlines. No. They were favored because of prophethood that was among them and their access to guidance. Jazakallah khair. Barakallah feek. But so you see in this ayah, Allah's telling us, when Allah speaks to us about Bani Israel, about the children of Israel, right? It's not to put them down, by the way. It's not to put them down. It is to warn us not to get the characteristics that'll make us fall in the same traps that those before us fell into. Bottom line. Because if Ummat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam were to do the same thing, they will find the same results. This is it. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, you know, one of the beautiful things that comes along with this, when the heart is very tough and rough and very blind to the pitfalls of misguidance, you know, it will do this. One of the verses soon after this is Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبِرِّ. Sorry, I think it's a soon before it. Soon before this is أتأمرون الناس بالبر وتنسون أنفسكم وأنتم تتلون الكتاب أفلا تعقلون. Allah Azza wa Jal, He tells them, He warns them, do you tell people to do good things and then forget yourselves while you're reciting the Quran? This is something to think about for every person who ever holds the Quran. Wallahi, it's a very difficult standard to live up to. Allah Azza wa Jal wants us to remember this every time we hold the Quran in our hands. You're reading it with your eyes, with your tongue, you're reflecting on it with your mind. Guess what? If this reflection doesn't translate to action, then it shows that your heart is impenetrable to guidance. That means the light and nur of guidance can't get through. That means your heart is so rough and tough and dark that the nur of guidance cannot get through to it. That's what we learn from this ayah. And then in the very end of the example, look at what Allah Azza wa Jal, He tells us, وَإِنَّ مِنَ الْحِجَارَةِ لَمَا يَتَفَجَّرُ مِنْهُ الْأَنْهَارُ. Right? وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَشَّقَّقُ فَيَخْرُجُ مِنْهُ الْمَاءُ وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَهْبِطُ مِنْ خَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ. And then وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. Allah tells us about realities of rocks, right? We find that some of the most delicious and most precious and most nourishing water that could come forth is the spring waters. Spring water that gushes forth from rocks, right? Spring water gushes forth from the mountains and the mountainsides, right? Allah Azza wa Jal tells us, hey, look, even when it comes to rocks, rocks have the capacity to bring forth from between them nourishing water. But your hearts don't have the capacity to be nourished by the nur of guidance. This is what Allah Azza wa Jal is telling us. إذا أجرينا هذه المقارنة وجدنا أن نسبة قساوة قلوب المخاطبين من بني إسرائيل تماثل نسبة قساوة الحجارة الصلدة المادية بل قلوبهم أشد قسوة. So he goes on to give here, Allah Azza wa Jal wants us to think deeply about how hard a heart can become, right? He tells us to reflect on the behaviors and see that the behaviors show whether the heart is hard or soft, right? There's a beautiful hadith, you know what it says? It says, قلوب العباد آنية الله في أرضه فأحبها إليه أصفاها وأرقها. The hadith says that the hearts of people are the vessels of Allah on His earth. The most beloved of these hearts are the purest of them and the most tender of them, right? And the most despised of these hearts to Allah Azza wa Jal are those that are hardest and most rejecting of truth. And that's why one of the worst diseases of the heart is qaswatul qalb. That is this example that Allah Azza wa Jal gives us. Bottom line is, think of hardness of the heart like the hardness of a rock. But realize that the hardness of the heart can be a lot worse than the hardness of a rock. Because there is goodness that comes forth from rocks, like with rivers, like with spring water. And still with that, the rocks are fulfilling their divine role in their place on this dunya. But when my heart is harsh, rough, tough, it has gone against its divine purpose. And that's the difference. Same thing with an'am and cattle. When a cattle or a cow functions the way it does, it's functioning the way Allah Azza wa Jal created it to function. But when I shut off my mind and my cognitive abilities and I act like an animal, who's worst? Me or the animal? I'm worst. Because I'm not functioning the way Allah Azza wa Jal wants me to function. Similar example with this rock example that we went over here. Wallahu a'lam. That's one other parable, verse 74 of Surat Al Baqarah. Let's look at the book. Look at the book for number 6. We're going to go over the 2 remaining parables that relate to infaq and charities in the end of Surat Al Baqarah. And I'm just going to ask our brother Muhammad if he could read for us from the beginning of 6. Inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Tfaddal.
Bismillah. Towards investing for the hereafter, the virtues of charity. In the next parable we will be discussing is found in the verse 265 of Surat Al Baqarah, continuing a sequence of 4 parables regarding charity found in just 1 page of the Quran. This is a great mercy of Allah Jalla Jalaluh, as He provides so many examples, inspirations and parables regarding charity. This is all to ingrain in us the understanding that donating in charity sincerely is like a guaranteed profitable investment, the returns of which will be certainly coming back to us manifold. If we invest appropriately whilst fulfilling all the conditions, we will become affluent in this world and the hereafter. However, if we do not invest properly, it will be an investment that crashes to zero and leaves us bankrupt. In verse 265, Allah Jalla Jalaluhu says, وَمَثَلُ الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ وَتَثْبِيتًا مِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ كَمَثَلِ جَنَّةٍ بِرَبْوَةٍ أَصَابَهَا وَابِلٌ فَآتَتْ أُكُلَهَا ضِعْفَيْنِ فَإِنْ لَمْ يُصِبْهَا وَابِلٌ فَطَلٌّ وَاللَّهُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ. And the example of those who donate their wealth seeking Allah's pleasure is as a reaffirmation of their own faith, is that of a garden on a fertile hill. When heavy rain falls, it yields up twice its normal produce. If no heavy rain falls, a drizzle is sufficient, and Allah is all-seeing of what you do.
Tamam. The 5th parable showed us how someone who gives their charities with man and adha, with injury and harm, is like someone who gives their wealth for other than Allah. Because injury and harm with charities is something that erases the reward of charity. Just as riyā and showing off erases the reward of charity. On the other end, when someone truly gives something for Allah Azza wa Jal, something special happens. Allah gives it as an example of a garden. And this garden has received heavy rains. And because of these heavy rains that came down on this very fertile ground, it gave forth more produce than it expected, more than is normal. And even if it doesn't have the heavy rains, then you'll find that it'll be nourished and goodness will always be coming to its way. Now, in the example, in the explanation of this, you will find the following in Tafsir ibn Kathir. He says, وَهَذَا مَثَلُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ الْمُنْفِقِينَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ. This example in this verse is like someone who gives for the sake of Allah. وَهُمْ مُتَحَقِّقُونَ مُثْبِتُونَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ سَيَجْزِيهِمْ عَلَى ذَلِكَ أَوْفَرَ الْجَزَاءِ. They are those who are doing all that is in their ability to bring goodness to others through their charities. And they are upon clarity that Allah Azza wa Jal will give them their reward in the greatest way. So Allah Azza wa Jal rewards us in kind, right? As they say, al-jaza'u min jins al-amal. The reward is a byproduct from the same type, min jins. From the same type of action you've done, you'll get the reward. Al-jaza'u min jins al-amal. In khayran fa khayr, wa in sharran fa shar. If it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. But when you compare the goodness of my doing to the goodness of Allah, there's no comparison whatsoever. You can't even mention it. It's not even worthy of mention anymore. When you consider how great Allah Azza wa Jal's ata is for those who do good things, right? There's no comparison. So he says, this is the example of someone who is doing what they're doing with full clarity that Allah Azza wa Jal will give the reward. Look at what he does. He says to explain the rest of this. He says here, فَإِن لَمْ يُصِبْهَا وَابِلٌ فَطَلٌ. What is this referring to? It's referring to the very light rain, the drizzle. All right, he says, لأنها إن لم يصبها وابل فطل وأيما كان فهو كفايتها وكذلك عمل المؤمن لا يبر أبدا بل يتقبله الله ويكثره وينميه كل عامل بحسبه. Right? So what does he say here? Know this, that Allah Azza wa Jal gives, and He gives the believer more and more. And no matter what the believer does, it'll never be in vain. Rather, Allah Azza wa Jal allows it to multiply and increase. And at the very least, He will certainly feel the goodness of His actions. There's no way that I will do something in this life and not, some act of goodness and not get the rewards for it, ajilan aw ajilan. This is what Allah Azza wa Jalla is telling us, the dynamic of giving. When you do something good, don't ever think it's gone. It is not gone. In fact, it's an investment. This investment, you will find it either in your dunya before your akhirah, or you'll find it all reserved for you on the Day of Judgment. This is the example that Allah Azza wa Jalla is telling us here. Either heavy rain, or at least the drizzle that will nourish the crops enough to bring forth goodness in return. لا يبور أبدا عمل المؤمن. It'll never be in ruin. Look at Allah Azza wa Jal. He tells us in another verse of the Quran. He says, Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, إن الذين يتلون كتاب الله وأقاموا الصلاة وأنفقوا مما رزقناهم سرا وعلانية يرجون تجارة لن تبور لِيُوَفِّيَهُمْ أُجُورَهُمْ وَيَزِيدَهُمْ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ إِنَّهُ غَفُورٌ شَكُورٌ. Beautiful verses of the Quran. It's beautiful to deal with Allah because it's always tijara rabiha. Allah Azza wa Jal, it's always a profitable transaction. Allah is telling us here, those who recite the Quran and they establish salah and they give from what we've given them, publicly and privately, are seeking a transaction that will never lead to loss. So that Allah Azza wa Jal will give them the reward in full, like fatal, as He says here. وَيَزِيدَهُمْ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. And so that He may increase them from His grace and His fadl. This is the dynamic of this parable that we learn. Now, I'm going to summarize, for the sake of time, what he says here. Some scholars opine that this is another parable for charity, being similar to an investment that gives you more than just what you put in. Similar to the previous parable. Other scholars say that this parable is informing us that the one who gives his wealth for the sake of Allah and as a reaffirmation of his own faith benefits in another way. So there's two things that you could take away here. Either it's similar to the previous parable in that you're going to get more than you put in. It's going to profit. Or Allah is telling us to look at new goodness that will come your way by the things that you do that are good. No, not just the same in return. You'll get that and you'll get something else you didn't expect. You know, there's a beautiful verse in the Quran. What does it say? This concept of وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ. Anyone who's ever engaged in mu'amalatullah, anyone who's ever had transactions with Allah Azza wa Jal will always tell you that this is indeed true. There is no way that you could do something for Allah and He's not going to give you something else that's special in return, right? That you didn't expect, right? As the Quran says, وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. Right? If you put your trust in Allah, Allah is enough for you. Don't think that you're going to do something good for His sake and He's just going to give you back what you put in. Right? This is how we deal with people. Human beings do this, right? You help me out, you give me $1,000 because I need it, I'm going to give you $1,000 back and I'm going to say thank you. I'm gonna appreciate the good thing that you did. But Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't do that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in another verse that we're going to go over, مَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يُقْرِضُ اللَّهَ قَرْضًا حَسَنًا فَيُضَاعِفَهُ لَهُ. It's one, right? You give Allah a goodly loan, qard hasan, no riba, right? And He gives you more in return, number one, وَلَهُ أَجْرٌ كَرِيمٌ. He gives you مضاعفة الأجر, and then He gives you something else that He calls al-ajr al-karim, a very noble gift in return. Two things, right? So this, again, this is the second thing that He's telling us you could take away from this. When you do something good, you're not going to just get more back of the same thing that you did. Look for something else that's going to come about in your life that is going to give you khair and goodness. That's why they say that, for example, that when someone does like something birr al-walidain, right? Birr al-walidain, you're good to your parents, right? Benevolence to your parents. Sometimes this is repaid in that Allah Azza wa Jal blesses you with a child that's good for you and good to you. But in addition to this, you might find that it actually gives you something else. That birr al-walidain actually gives you something else. What is this? Al-barakah fi rizq. You'll find that because of goodness to your parents, Allah Azza wa Jal will give you a lot of blessings in your money, right? Or, and in any other example, that you may help someone in affliction and trial, Allah Azza wa Jal will give you those to help you in your time of need, number one. But that's not it. Okay, all right. You helped someone in need. Tomorrow you're in need. Allah sends you someone to help you when you're in need, right? This is exactly what you did for someone else before. But what's az-ziyada, what's al-ajr al-kareem, as that other verse is telling us about? What is this increase that we're looking for? In addition to helping someone in need, you will find that something else will be given to you. What is this? مَنْ نَفَّسَ عَنْ مُؤْمِنٍ كُرْبَةً مِنْ كُرَبِ الدُّنْيَا نَفَّسَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ كُرْبَةً مِنْ كُرَبِ يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. Not only will you find someone to help you when you're in need, when you help people in need, on the Day of Judgment, when people are scared, terrified, and they don't know where to go, Allah Azza wa Jal will make the difficulty of the Day of Judgment easier for you on the Day of Judgment. Why? Because that special amal salih that you did in the dunya. And وَهَلُمَّ جَرًّا, you could continue to find examples. When you do amal salih, it is not enough for Al-Kareem Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to just give you the reward for your amal. He gives you the reward for your amal and then He gives you something extra. And this something extra can be completely unrelated to the thing that you did altogether. Yeah, you see? It's a new way to think about my dealings with Allah. In fact, you may feel it in your personal life, that Allah Azza wa Jal will make something easier for you that was really difficult. Like what? Like something relating to your business, something relating to your assets, something relating to your relationships, something relating to something else. Why? ببركة some type of amal salih, by the blessings of some amal salih that you did in your dunya, between you and Allah Azza wa Jal. So that's what he says. He says another interesting benefit of this verse can be derived from the condition and as a reaffirmation of their own faith. Okay, he says here that this clause clarifies that the faith of true believers reaffirms that they will still give for the sake of Allah. Now, al-mu'min, he does these good things, not expecting something in return necessarily, right? The believer does good things because the believer is a good person. He's has a sense of tiba and pleasantness to him, and he wants to do good, right? This is the motive for the believer. So now here, Allah Azza wa Jal says, وَتَثْبِيتًا مِّنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ, right? They're doing this good. Why? وَمِثَلُ الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ وَتَثْبِيتًا مِّنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ. Why is he saying وَتَثْبِيتًا مِّنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ? Why is he saying, and they are doing this for their own sake, right? Why? Because the mu'min wants to do the right thing, whether he's going to get something in return or not. The mu'min does good things not because other people are being good to him. The mu'min does good things because, again, he is of a pleasant nature, right? And that's what تَثْبِيتًا مِّنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ means. What تَثْبِيتًا مِّنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ means that their iman is unique in the way that they would do these things regardless of getting anything in return. Now, this reminds us of another verse in the Quran where Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْتُونَ مَا آتَوْا وَقُلُوبُهُمْ وَجِلَةٌ أَنَّهُمْ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ رَاجِعُونَ. They are the ones who do everything that they can, and then what? Then what? All right, they do everything they can, and their hearts are scared. They're trembling. Allahu Akbar. What is this? If I do a lot of good things, what will this cause my state to be? It could cause me to become very arrogant. Right? I remember I did this for you and I helped you in that, and everyone in the community depends on me because of this, and I am, and I've been doing this and that for the past 20, 30, 40 years. وما في حد أحسن مني, and there's no one better than me, and there's no one more giving than me, and there's no one more knowledgeable than me, and I am the cause of all goodness in al-Mashriq wal-Maghrib. A'udhu billah. Sometimes kibr could be that intoxicating. Kibr could be that intoxicating that I begin to think that everything good that's happening is by virtue of my doing. Wal-'iyadhu billah. Right? So, but the believer, لَيْسَ هَذَا شَأْنُهُ. It's not the nature of the believer. The nature of the believer is the more he does, it actually humbles his heart more. It makes him more worried. Why? He's doing it because he's of a pleasant nature, and his pleasant nature makes him even more concerned that he's not doing enough. Right? So Sayyidah Aisha asked the Prophet ﷺ, said, why is this about the believer who prays and fasts, but then he steals and he fornicates and he does other bad things? Prophet ﷺ said, La, no, La ya Aisha. This is about the believer who prays and fasts and gives sadaqah, and then he's afraid that it won't be accepted from him. Ya Allah. So this is وَتَثْبِيتًا مِّنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ. Right. All right. So now the next parable after this is parable 7. It's a continuation. It's the next verse after that. It's the next one relating to infaq. أَيَوَدُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَن تَكُونَ لَهُ جَنَّةٌ مِّن نَخِيلٍ وَأَعْنَابٍ. Let's read it. تفضل. Page 58. Page 58. We're on parable 7.
Spending sincerely for the sake of Allah. In the first 266 of Surat Al Baqara, Allah Jalla Jalaluhu asks a rhetorical question in the final parable of this section. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم أيود أحدكم أن تكون له جنة من نخيل وأعناب تجري من تحتها الأنهار له فيها من كل الثمرات وأصابه الكبر وله ذرية ضعفاء فأصابها إعصار فيه نار فاحترقت كذلك يبين الله لكم الآيات لعلكم تتفكرون. Would any of you wish to have a garden with palm trees, grapevines, and all kinds of fruits, with rivers flowing underneath, and as they grow very old with dependent children, a fiery whirlwind hits the ground, the garden, burning it all up? This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes His revelations clear to you, so perhaps you will reflect. Allah Jalla Jalaluhu is
before you go on, let's read it. Read it carefully. What we're reading here is actually something that doesn't have to do with old age or having children or having a garden at all, by the way. It's a parable Allah wants us to think about. He says, would any of you wish to have a garden? This garden is amazing. It has everything that you could ever want. It's so beautiful and so full and complete, right? This person, like someone who buys a house, right? And wants to make his dream home, right? He's going to get tiles that look like this. And he's going to build a kitchen that looks like that. And he's going to make the basement like this. And the bathrooms like that. And he's going to think of the color, the texture, the design, the appearance. And he might end up spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on renovations, right? One of the crazy stories that I heard is there's this famous superstar in sports. He wants to build his dream home, right? And this dream home is going to cost $100 million. $100 million. And in order to build this amazing $100 million dream home, he buys a $30 million mansion and he destroys it. Right? So to build his dream home, he needs to buy this thing that people can only imagine and dream of ever stepping foot in, right? But it's too low. It's only cost $30 million, right? It's garbage. So what do I need to do? I have $1 billion anyway, right? So I'm gonna just tear this $30 million apart, throw it away, and I'm gonna build $100 million mansion in his place, right? Allah Azza wa Jal wants us to think about something so elaborate and something so time-consuming. And if anyone's ever worked on construction and thought about building and building material, we have some people who work in this field, right? It's exhausting. You have to think about a lot of things, right? And it takes all out of you until you finish this project. Imagine, all right, think about Route 46, right? They've been working on that thing since before I was a child, aslan. They've been working on it for decades, right? Route 46, Allahu Akbar, right? So again, it's crazy how Allah Azza wa Jalla, He wants us to think deeply about this example. He says, this person reached old age. He exhausted all his efforts. He had nothing else left to do. And he even had, all right, what did he have? وَلَهُ ذُرِّيَّةٌ ضُعَفَاء. He had children, but these children were unable to keep up with what he was doing. وَلَهُ ذُرِّيَّةٌ ضُعَفَاء. These children can't fend for themselves, they can't do anything, right? He built them into luxury, and now they can't carry on. وَلَهُ ذُرِّيَّةٌ ضُعَفَاء. Then what happens? فَأَصَابَهَا إِعْصَارٌ فِيهِ نَارٌ فَاحْتَرَقَتْ. This whirlwind came its way and completely destroyed everything he built. When you think about this, what's going to happen now? This guy, is he going to be able to rebuild what he did, what he put in there? It reminds me of one of may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give faraj and ease to the people of Gaza. Reminds me of one of the videos that came out of there. That woman who spent 40 years to gather the money to build up her home, the family's home, saving money and doing all she can. And within the matter of seconds, her 40-year dream came crashing down by one of the missiles that Israel sent down on Gaza. May Allah Azza wa Jal allow His punishment to descend upon them. Allahumma ameen. Descend upon the people of the Israel. So this woman said, I spent 40 years building this. There's no way I can ever think of rebuilding this again. She's an old woman now. That's it. What am I going to do? My whole life's work came crashing down in the matter of minutes. And it shows you a reality of dunya. But this verse is not talking about that. This verse is telling us about something even worse. You know what's worse than all that? This person who does everything they do from amal salih. And then they build, and everything they built comes crashing down because of their corrupt intention. They put in all the work, they fasted Ramadan, and they only got exhaustion out of fasting. They did qiyam, and they only got exhaustion out of qiyam. They gave charities, and the only thing they experienced from giving these charities is loss of money. That's it, right? Look at what Imam Ibn Kathir says about this ayah. Look, it's a very beautiful verse. He says, Sayyidina Umar said, قال عمر يوما لأصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في من ترون هذه الآية نزلت. Who do you think this verse came down concerning? So they said, قالوا الله أعلم. They told Sayyidina Umar, Allah knows best. So Sayyidina Umar got angry. فغضب عمر فقال قولوا نعلم أو لا نعلم. Sayyidina Umar got upset. Why are you trying to beat around the bush? Either you know or you don't know. Just tell me. If you don't know, say I don't know. Why are you trying to say Allahu Alam? Say I don't know. Right? So anyway. فقال ابن عباس في نفسي منها شيء يا أمير المؤمنين. Sayyidina Ibn Abbas, who was Turjuman al-Quran, said, I kind of feel like I know what it's speaking about. So Ibn Abbas told Sayyidina Umar this, and Sayyidina Umar said to him, يا ابن أخي قل ولا تحقر نفسك. O son of my brother, say and don't undermine yourself. So Ibn Abbas said, ضربت مثلا لعمل. This is a metaphor, an example of someone who does a behavior. So Umar said, وَأَيُّ عَمَل? So Ibn Abbas said, لِعَمَل. So Sayyidina Umar then filled in the blank. Shows you what? Turjuman al-Quran wasn't quick to do tafsir. Right? Sayyidina Ibn Abbas, he wasn't someone يتجرع على كتاب الله عز وجل. He feels he knows the answer, لكن متردد. Should I say this or not? Because we learn from the Prophet ﷺ that someone who says about the Quran when they don't know is in error even when they're correct. That's why one of the most egregious things that you could do is to dare interpret something from the Quran and you don't have clear knowledge of it. Right? There's a jarima, it's a crime, and we have it. It's all too common. Fulan is holding the translation, can't even read the Arabic, and is giving people explanations from the Quran based on their understandings of translations. Musibah, right? So anyway, Sayyidina Umar said, ضربت مثلا لرجل غني يعمل بطاعة الله ثم بعث الله له الشيطان فعمل بالمعاصي حتى أغرق أعماله. This is an example of someone who does so many good deeds and then the shaitan comes his way and makes him go far, far away from the path. And he messes up everything he did. Ya Allah, Allah yastur alayna. May Allah protect us and not allow us to be of that result. Imagine that. Reaching old age and not having anyone to carry on your legacy. What does that mean? Meaning that you've lived a lifetime and you've done a lot of good things, and guess how it all ends? It all ends in kharab and damar. Wal-'iyadhu billah. So another hadith actually about the same ayah says the following. It says, so he says similar. So عن ابن عباس قال ضرب الله له مثلا حسنا وكل أمثاله حسن. Right? He says here يقول ضيعه في شيبته وأصابه الكبر. Right? He built this garden and now he wasted it in his old age. وولده وذريته ضعاف عند آخر عمره فجاءه إعصار فيه نار فأحرق بستانه فلم يكن عنده قوة أن يغرس مثله ولم يكن عند نسله خير يعودون به عليه وكذلك الكافر يوم القيامة إذا رد إلى الله عز وجل ليس له خير فيستعتب كما ليس لهذا قوة فيغرس مثل بستانه. Right? So he says the same thing on the Day of Judgment. Some people are going to come forth and they're going to find that they lived their life and it was all like a mirage. It was all swept, the rug was swept from underneath their feet. Didn't benefit them whatsoever. So this is this example. Let's read a little bit more from this section so that we see him fill in the blanks for us. Go ahead, read.
Allah Jalla Jalaluhu is presenting the case of an individual who owns a lush garden that contains a variety of valuable fruits and plants. The owner is profiting and benefiting from this garden without having to lift a finger. This owner then becomes elderly and has young children, such that he becomes preoccupied and unable to undertake strenuous activity due to his age. Eventually, the time comes for this owner to leave the world and die. At this point, he needs to leave this ideal garden as a legacy for his young children. So they are still dependent, unable to earn for themselves, and do not have another source of income. However, this is a sensitive in this sensitive situation, a ravaging fire-filled tornado raises and devastates this garden. In this parable, Allah Jalla Jalaluhu is telling us that the person who donates wealth for the sake of showing off is similar to the person who owns a lush garden. However, when he is most in need of this lush garden on the Day of Judgment for harvesting rewards, similar to how the elderly owner needs it when passing away for the sake of his dependent children, it is completely obliterated before his eyes and absolutely nothing is left salvageable. Allah Jalla Jalaluhu is posing a rhetorical question in this verse, asking us if we would wish to be that unfortunate man. We would obviously not, for this unfortunate individual was deceived. This is because he did not act and donate for the sake of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. Such an insincere donator would think that he has dazzled by donating thousands of dollars, so he would be deserving of a prime reward. However, as he donated to impress people and not for the sake of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, on the Day of Judgment, his situation will be as Allah Jalla Jalaluhu vividly describes. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وقدمنا إلى ما عملوا من عمل فجعلناه هباء منثورا. Then we will turn to whatever good deeds they did, reducing them to scattered dust. This parable makes us understand that if we perform a good deed with an impure intention, the deed might appear good to people, but it will in reality be of no benefit or value for us in the hereafter. More broadly, if any action is not to be done purely for the sake of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, then that action is of no value. Thus, the garden of the one who gives for the sake of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu will last many generations, as mentioned earlier in Surat Al Baqarah. But the garden of the one who gives for the sake of his own ego, will be completely obliterated.
Jazakallah khair. So look, one of the things that this also emphasizes to us is that whenever I do something with my body, I as a mu'min cannot divorce it from my internal state. The internal and external go hand in hand, abadan. Like we said, and this is with siyam coming, the Prophet ﷺ says, رُبَّ صَائِمٍ لَيْسَ لَهُ مِنْ صِيَامِهِ إِلَّا الْجُوعُ وَالْعَطَشُ وَرُبَّ قَائِمٍ لَيْسَ لَهُ مِنْ قِيَامِهِ إِلَّا السَّهَرُ. There are those who do qiyam and they only get exhausted by it. And there are those who fast and only get thirsty and hungry through it. Right? So what does this tell us in other words? Every action I do has an internal and an external. ظاهر وباطن. And the only way that iman works is if al-zahir and al-batin yatatabaqan. That there is this, that the inward and the outward are in sync with each other. They reconcile each other. It's not something that's just on the outside. May Allah forgive us and may Allah protect us. But what does this tell us? You know what? If you want to be a true mu'min, there's no way you could be a true mu'min and act one way publicly and another way privately. There's no way that you can be a true mu'min and deal with people in one way and then know deep down inside. This reminds me of a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where the Prophet ﷺ said that there will be those who come on the Day of Judgment with good deeds the size of mountains, and Allah Azza wa Jalla will make it like dispersed dust. So the companion said, Ya Rasulullah, صفهم لنا ألا نكون منهم ونحن لا ندري. Describe them to us so that we're not from them when we don't know. So Prophet ﷺ said, ألا إنهم إخوانكم ومن جلدتكم ويأخذون من الليل كما تأخذون. They are your brothers. They pray like you pray. And ولكنهم أناس إذا خلوا بمحارم الله انتهكوها. But there are people, when they're alone with what is haram and the boundaries of Allah Azza wa Jalla, they breach those boundaries. They breach those boundaries. So right now, each one of us in alam al-shahada, we're doing something good right now, right? In alam al-shahada, each and every one of us is doing something very virtuous. In the witnessed realm, what are we doing? I'm sitting down, reflecting on the Quran in the masjid. But in alam al-ghayb, in the unseen realm, each one of us has a status or a condition, right? We don't know this condition. what is my condition right now? Right here, it's either going to be muflih, or what? Or it's going to be successful, or what? Failure. Successful or failure. That's one of the two. Here, I don't know. You don't know. You don't know. We know that from the realities of the Day of Judgment, as the Quran describes, it is خافضة رافعة. خافضة رافعة. What does that mean? تخفض أقواما ترفع أقواما وتضع آخرين. It will elevate some people. There are some people right now in عالم الغيب, in the unseen realm. They are obscure to people. They're not known to people. They're not in the limelight, right? But by Allah, they're very special. And Allah loves them so much. And there are those people in alam al-shahada. They are so highly regarded by people and lifted up. But by Allah Azza wa Jal, they are utterly bankrupt. This leaves no room for anyone to feel a full sense of security. La. No way. You can't feel a full sense of security. Right now, and that's why this thought process actually terrified our righteous predecessors. Some of them said, to the extent that I wish that I can know right now that Allah Azza wa Jal had accepted from me 2 rak'ahs from the rak'ahs that I've done throughout my lifetime, and my heart would be at ease if I know that Allah had accepted it from me. Because if Allah accepts, that means I am successful. If Allah rejects, that means I am an abject failure. I'll give you one more thing. There's a scene from the Day of Judgment that tells us this, that there will be someone in hellfire, right, who will have his guts protruding from his body, right? تندلق أقطاب بطنه, right? يدور فيها كما يدور الحمار في الرحى. And this person will be squealing in hellfire, screaming. فيجتمع عليه أهل النار. The people of hellfire will come around this person in hellfire, and they'll say to this person, what are you doing here? Fulan, what are you doing here? We did not think that we would see you from among the people of hellfire. We thought you were a good person. So he said, كنت آمر بالمعروف ولا آتيه وأنهى عن المنكر وآتيه. I would tell people to do good things and I didn't do them myself. And I would tell people to avoid doing bad things and I ended up doing them myself. Right now in hellfire, this person will be the scene for everyone in hellfire to look at. It's a sign for every mu'min. Hey, watch out. You might get away with it in this dunya because what? In the observed realm, people see, oh, mashallah, this person's religious. This person's always in the masjid. This person knows about the Quran. This person has the Quran memorized. This person looks like a good person. They dress they have a beard, or they have a hijab, or they ila akhirih. This is all alam al-shahada. Alam al-ghayb, you know when I'll find out what alam al-ghayb for me looks like? When Malak al-Maut comes for my soul. When Malak al-Maut comes for my soul, no more doubts. I'm going to see it with my own eyes. I'm either going to see beautiful angels coming to take my soul, or I'm going to see the most terrifying angels I've ever could have imagined coming to take for my soul. What is it going to look like when they're coming for me? We need to ask ourselves this question. What will it look like when they are coming for me? No one can help any one of us at that moment. May Allah help us. Ameen. This is the 7th parable that we find here. And there's another one. I'll share another one that's not in the book. Allah Azza wa Jal tells us about a group of people. Again, like Surat Al Baqarah tells us a lot about people and their personalities, right? And their characteristics. Their personalities and their characteristics. In verse 171, open that. Verse 171 of Surat Al Baqarah. Ustaz Muhammad, I don't know if you can easily open it with the translation. If you have quick access to that, go to Quran.com if you don't have an app, and just put Surat Al Baqarah, verse 171. The Arabic says, وَمَثَلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا كَمَثَلِ الَّذِي يَنْعِقُ بِمَا لَا يَسْمَعُ إِلَّا دُعَاءً وَنِدَاءً صُمٌّ بُكْمٌ عُمْيٌ فَهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. Right? Allah Azza wa Jal gives an example of disbelievers here. And He says that this example is like the example of someone who yells at قطيع من الغنم. Right? This person, there's a flock of sheep. Imagine if someone did this, what would they think about him? Majnoon, right? Majnoon. This person is saying, يا جماعة تعالوا هان. Right? The قطيع الغنم, they're going this way. The flock of sheep are going that way. Guys, come here. Where are you going? Right? Imagine someone talks like that to a bunch of ghanam. The ghanam, they're going to say, oh, حاضر سيدي, جايين. The ghanam are going to say that? We're coming? We're coming. Save us a spot? No, they're not. The only thing that works with ghanam is what? You need to have that special stick. I don't know what they call it. The stick, the one for the shepherd, huh? No, they don't whip. Do they whip sheep? No, they guide them along. Yani the stick. Yani you don't talk to sheep. If you try to talk to sheep, that means if you're having conversations with sheep, that means you need to sit down with a doctor. Yani that's what it means if you're having conversations with sheep. Yani what do you do with the sheep? You just guide them along the way. You stay around the edges and you tap them if they go too much to the right. Or tap them if you go too much to the left. Imagine someone yelling at the sheep and getting frustrated. They don't listen. Why aren't they listening to me? Allah's telling us some people are like sheep, right? They don't listen, right? It's difficult to talk to them. They will, no matter what you tell them, right? They will never change their ways. What does the translation say? Huh? What does the translation say? Read it for us.
The example of the disbelievers not responding to the messenger's warning is like a flock not comprehending the calls and cries of the shepherd. They are willfully deaf, dumb, and blind, so they have no understanding.
So this parable, it's a short one, short and sweet. Allah Azza wa Jalla is telling us about a category of people. Look, there are those, and Allah, the Prophet ﷺ told in the Quran, look, لَسْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ بِمُسَيْطِرٍ, right? You do not have dominion over them and full authority. لَسْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ بِمُسَيْطِرٍ. In another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَفَأَنْتَ تُكْرِهُ النَّاسَ حَتَّى يَكُونُوا مُؤْمِنِينَ. Can you possibly force people to believe? No. People have to believe for themselves. They're not going to believe. What are you going to say? What are you going to do? In another verse, the Quran tells the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, لَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ أَلَّا يَكُونُوا مُؤْمِنِينَ. Don't ruin yourself, O Muhammad, from pain and from being emotionally distraught because they're not believing. There are those who, when it comes to listening to guidance, they are like sheep to the shepherd who's trying to call out to them. He's going to call out to them all he wants. They will never listen. It's nothing about Muhammad ﷺ that wasn't good. Now pay attention to this. Sometimes this is an important lesson because sometimes you might have someone you love in your life that you want something good for, right? You try to help somebody. Now I'm not telling you to think of them like sheep. No. But Allah Azza wa Jalla is giving us an example to think about in terms of how effective our words can be. Sometimes it might be someone you love, like your mother, your father, if they're not Muslim, for example, or your children, if they're making bad decisions, for example, or a friend who you're trying to save from really, really bad situation, for example, or so on and so forth. You could think of tons of examples. Allah Azza wa Jalla is saying, don't think for a second that you're the problem. Sometimes there are people who no matter what you do, they will never change themselves. It's not your fault if you've done everything within your capacity. As long as you do what's between you and Allah, that's it. I've done what's in my capacity. Addaytu ma alay. As the Prophet ﷺ says, Ala hal ballaghт? And the companions, they said, Allahumma na'am. What? Allahumma fashad. That's it. I've done what I could, I've tried, and it's just not working. Don't think that because you're a good da'i, that people will automatically respond. And don't think that when they don't respond, it means you are a bad da'i. That's what this parable is teaching us. Wallahu a'lam. So that's another dose from Surat Al Baqarah. Put that one to the side. Let's go to the eighth one. Let's go to the eighth one. And this is the last one for Surat Al Baqarah in our book. All right, can you read it for us?
A vivid warning against those who consume and benefit from interest. Beginning from the verse of the throne, the concluding portion of Surat Al Baqarah focuses mainly on charity and wealth. In the very last section of the chapter, on multiple occasions, Allah Jalla Jalaluhu also discusses and contrasts charity with its opposite concept, namely interest, riba. In the verse 275, Allah Jalla Jalaluhu provides a unique parable about interest in order to show the gravity of it. Allah Jalla Jalaluhu says, الذين يأكلون الربا لا يقومون إلا كما يقوم الذي يتخبطه الشيطان من المس. Those who consume interest will stand on Day of Judgment like those driven to madness by Satan's touch. This parable uses particularly a powerful language, as no person physically consumes the wealth of interest. Rather, through such a statement, Allah Jalla Jalaluhu is drawing our attention to the negative effects of dealing with interest wealth. The food and clothes that have been purchased with such wealth are devoid of blessings, and it is as if the forbidden wealth has become part of your flesh. It is as if the food and clothing purchased with such wealth is now within and upon your body. If we scrutinize the verse in further detail, we find that Allah Jalla Jalaluhu uses the verb yatakhabbat. This verb has been loosely translated above as stand. However, it can be more comprehensively defined as a manner of crooked walking, in which a person deviates, acts strangely, and flails his limbs in a way that leaves him prone to trembling. Further on this verse, the word al-mas refers to madness or insanity. Allah Jalla Jalaluhu is saying that on the Day of Judgment, the consumer of interest wealth will be walking like a disoriented person who has been driven insane by the devil. According to the scholars, the intended metaphor here is that on the day of resurrection, the people who consumed interest will be made to rise from their graves in a frightening and undignified manner, as if they have lost all their senses. On that day, all of them will be identified as the ones who dealt with interest. They will be recognized by their lack of control over their limbs, as they continuously stumble and struggle to move. The great scholar
All right, Bismillah. Stop there for a second. Now, I want you guys to take a look in your mushaf at the ayat and the verses about riba. They start from this verse 275 in Surat Al Baqarah, and they continue to the very end of the page, which is verse 281. Okay? It's important to note the following. Now, if I'm really going to have this concept of sam' and ta'ah, listening and obeying, it needs to apply to every part of my life. Right? Pay attention to this. Now, it's one thing to have listening and have the concept of listening and obeying and sam' and ta'ah when it comes to siyam, right? In ayat of Ramadan. Or to have sam' and ta'ah when it comes to matters of character and spirituality, like being someone who has tawakkul, someone who has sabr and patience, someone who conforms to the commands of Allah Azza wa Jalla in performing Hajj, or even other situations that require a sense of commitment to Allah. Right? It's one thing, but now, will this apply to other parts of my life that are more sensitive? Pay attention. Towards the end of Surat Al Baqarah, there are a stretch of ayat known as ayat al-talaq, the verses on divorce. And the reason why these are relevant in Surat Al Baqarah, because if you're someone who could remain committed to Allah Azza wa Jal in divorce, that means you're a person of immense character. Because it's a very tough situation, and it's easy for your character to be corrupted and say, you know what, I'm going to smear this person's reputation. You know what, I'm going to sue this person for every dollar they have. You know what, I'm going to take this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to deny that, I'm going to delay that, and I'm going to kada, wa kada, wa kada, مش عارف إيه. A lot, the taqwa of people is tested a lot in divorce. Now that's towards the end of Surah Al Baqarah. What else must my sam'an ta'a apply to? It must apply to the way I manage my money, right? There's no way that I could be this great mu'min, so to say, and then when it comes to money, I have no boundaries whatsoever in terms of my commitment to Allah and what I will do and what I will not do. There's no way that someone could be muslih li dineh وليس مصلحا لدنياه وليس مصلحا لدنياه ولا مصلحا لماله. There's no way that someone could be true to his deen yet utterly corrupt in his dunya. If that's the reality, then no. Why is that coming about? Because there's no true iman in the heart. There is nifaq in the heart. There's hypocrisy in the heart. A sign of this hypocrisy is, I am in the first row in salah every single day. When I go outside, I may cheat, I may lie, I may take something that doesn't belong to me, I may be unfair in my business practices. And also what? If I have the opportunity to make more money through unhalal means, I will do that. Through non-halal means, I will do that too. Right? So this is why the ayat of riba are relevant in Surah Al Baqarah. The concept of riba is mentioned in other parts of the Quran, but very briefly. There's actually no place in the entire Quran that addresses the concept of riba with this level of detail than like it was in Surat Al Baqarah. There was something else that we said in Surat Al Baqarah. It's the only place that it's addressed like this. Only place. What's the other thing that we said is addressed only in Surat Al Baqarah? Ramadan. Right? Verses on Ramadan, only in Surat Al Baqarah. Verses on riba, only in Surat Al Baqarah. A page-long verse, only in Surat Al Baqarah. That page-long verse is on what? It's on recording debts. That's what it's about, recording your debts. Right? إِذَا تَدَايَنْتُمْ بِدَيْنٍ إِلَى أَجَلٍ مُسَمًّى فَاكْتُبُوا. Write down your debts that you owe. Right? If you're a person of taqwa, there's no way that you would tell fulan, give me 10,000 and I'll pay you back, and then you put it in your pocket and then disappear. There's no way. That's a lie. If someone ever claims that this person is lying to themselves before anyone else, that they could think that they have true iman in their heart, yet abuse the money of people. Right? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, forgive us, and guide us. Allahumma ameen. But this is a hallmark of iman. Only in Surah Al Baqarah do you find a page-long verse. And what is this page-long verse about? Recording debts. Now, interestingly, the last verse, according to the majority of scholars, is also revealed in Surah Al Baqarah. What is this verse? It is the verse right after the page on riba. Right? وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا تُرْجَعُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ. This is verse 281 of Surah Al Baqarah. This is the last verse revealed in the entire Quran to the Prophet ﷺ. What does it say? And fear a day, or be conscious of a day that you will all return to Allah. Then every nafs will get what it has earned, and no one will be oppressed. ثُمَّ تُوَفَّى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. Right? So this is the last verse. There's something else that's unique in Surah Al Baqarah. Again, what are the unique things in Surah Al Baqarah that I'm telling you? It's the only surah that has the verses about Ramadan. It is the only surah that goes in detail on riba. It is the only surah that has a page-long verse, and that verse is about recording debts. It is the surah that has the last verse that was revealed in the Quran. And it is the only surah that has this expression. Right? What is this unique expression that I'm going to tell you now? فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا فَأْذَنُوا بِحَرْبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. Right? What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَذَرُوا مَا بَقِيَ مِنَ الرِّبَا إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. O you who believe, avoid riba. And if you're a true believer, then you're going to avoid riba. If you don't, then guess what's going to happen? فَأْذَنُوا بِحَرْبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. Then you will find a war waged upon you by Allah and His Prophet. Right? Anyone who undermines riba and the subject of riba, may Allah forgive us, protect us, alleviate our circumstance from ever being a people who are dependent on riba. Allahumma ameen. But what Allah says, if you do not avoid it, then a war will be waged upon you from Allah and His Prophet. Anyone who underestimates riba does not understand the severity of this language. Now, here's an interesting fact for you. So this was another thing unique thing about Surat Al Baqarah. There are only two things in our entire deen that we know of that have this expression, that if you do this, then a war will be waged upon you by Allah. This is one of them. The one who engages wrongfully in riba. What's the other one? Does anyone know? It's mentioned in the Sunnah. It's not mentioned in the Quran. Who knows? If you do something, a war will be waged upon you by Allah. What is it? What is it? Dhulm? Be more specific. No, not fitna. You know? Huh? No, not the orphan's money. No. Hurting, not fasad, not corruption. Hurting a specific type of person. The Hadith Qudsi says, "Man aadha li waliyan, faqad aadhantuhu bil harb." Right? Whoever hurts one of my awliya and those who are near and dear and beloved to Allah, then I have declared war upon him. These are the two things that we know that Allah Azza wa Jal declares war upon someone for doing this act. So this shows you that there's a lot to worry about in terms of riba. This specific parable actually tells us something that will happen to society. Look at this description. This description is telling us that someone who engages in riba will walk about this earth كَالَّذِي يَتَخَبَّطُهُ الشَّيْطَانِ. He'll be flailing his limbs, he'll be tumbling about, he'll be deviated, he'll be crooked. What does this remind me of? You know what this reminds me of? This is not just for the individual. This is for society. And this is actually one of the biggest signs for society today. As people who live in a time where the cornerstone of the modern day economy is based on riba, we see what riba has done to the global economy today. It has caused all kinds of depressions to happen, financial depressions, that's what I mean, financial depressions. And it has caused all kinds of difficulty, inflation and hyperinflation. It has caused all kinds of problems for states and governments, to the point that now economists are searching for a more stable, look what they say, the instability, the inflation that has come about because of the way the banks function has caused instability, economic instability. What does that remind you of? يَتَخَبَّطُهُ الشَّيْطَانُ مِنَ الْمَسِّ. Right? Unstable, right? The lives of humanity today has become unstable because of riba. Right? It's caused insecurity, it's caused fear, it's caused many people to lose their businesses, many people to lose their homes, it's caused people to be put out on the street, it's caused financial enslavement, and so on and so forth. This is what it is. Why does Islam prohibit riba? Because it is a means to financial enslavement. You get on credit card debt, And guess what? You could spend the rest of your life trying to pay this thing off, and by the time you actually pay it off, you pay double or triple what they actually gave you. Mujrimin, right? Mujrimin. The biggest criminals of today are those people who work, I don't want to mention specific places, but they work in the field of dealing with banks, credit card companies, insurance, all this stuff that exploits and subjugates the needs of people. Exploiting and subjugating, that's what Allah says, you know? If this language is tough, it's nothing compared to the language of the Quran, right? Someone wants to be truly guided on how to deal with their money, go to the language of the Quran. What would you rather I say? Allah will declare war on you, or the words I just said? Declare war on you seems a little bit more difficult and more stringent, right? So anyway, this is the context of riba. Let's see what else he says here before we finish today. Go ahead. Look here. Why is this their state? Because they have this misconception in their mind. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ قَالُوا إِنَّمَا الْبَيْعُ مِثْلُ الرِّبَى. They said, no, this doesn't make sense. Buying and selling is exactly like interest. You know, interest is just being a smart businessman, right? If I could find ways to make more money, then why would you tell me no? No, I want to profit, right? It's all about profiteering, right? That's what it is. So go ahead, read from where it says, thus the stern punishment mentioned in this verse.
Thus, the stern punishment mentioned in this verse has been reserved for the flagrant sinner who openly challenges the Sharia of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu and justifies the sin without any regret or remorse. Committing the sin is blameworthy in itself, but justifying it is a form of disbelief, kufr. As a matter of distinction, a sinner who acknowledges his sin has the hope of being forgiven, as he has an inner realization of his misdeeds, which may lead him to regret and repentance. On the other hand, the sinner who justifies a sin and challenges Allah's law by putting his own opinions above his creator's will has fallen into a deep pit of rejection that is difficult to escape from. Seldom will such an arrogant individual realize his error and be blessed to repent. This is why the verse primarily addresses such individuals so sternly, warning mankind from being from amongst these wretched souls. Some scholars present another interpretation of the metaphor found in the verse, postulating that Allah Jalla Jalaluhu is describing the sorry state of the interest consumers in the world and not the hereafter. Allah Jalla Jalaluhu is saying that such people who deal in interest may be seen as dignified or respectable in society, but in reality their hearts and souls are in turmoil. They publicly feign happiness, but are full of inner emptiness without understanding its reason. They are aimlessly wandering in their private lives due to metaphorical insanity. This is all because they preposterously claim that common trade is the same as interest, blatantly ignoring that Allah Jalla Jalaluhu has made one lawful whilst rendering the other unlawful.
Jazakallah khair. Barakallah feek. So look, that's the last of the parables in Surat Al Baqarah. Number 9 is a parable in Surat Al Imran, and number 10 is a parable in Surat Al An'am. And inshallah, we're going to be continuing with number 9 next time. The ones that are we're going to try to cover some ground. That way we finish this course, like we said, before Ramadan. Before anyone gets up, let me just say these two things. Like we said, this book, if you didn't get it, you can get it. I think we still have some copies. The masjid's selling it for $15. You could just donate it to the masjid through the QR link that's over there. You could get the book and just donate it at your freedom to the masjid, inshallah. The second thing is we have coming up in 2 weeks from today, so not next Sunday, the Sunday after it, we have our one-day intensive. If you didn't see the announcement for it, We're going to share it in the group, inshallah, again. The flyer and the blurb and then the registration form. I encourage you all to register. It's about Bidayatul Hidayah, the beginning of guidance. This is a book written by Imam al-Ghazali that speaks to us about critical matters in the beginning of the journey to Allah Azza wa Jal, focusing on ta'at, acts of worship, and ma'asi, etiquettes of avoiding sin. And then the last one is etiquettes of dealing with Allah and dealing with people. Adab suhbat al-khaliq wa suhbat al-khalq. So there's a QR code on the flyer that you could scan and register. I encourage you all to do it. It's going to be from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. on Sunday, February 18, bi'idhnillah. If you register, it comes with the book, and also it comes with lunch along with it, inshallah. This is a good way to prep for Ramadan, since Ramadan is about 5 weeks out now, so that we can approach changing our lives with in a meaningful way, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So that's enough for today. We're going to stop here. Subhanakallahum bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Jazakumullah khair. We're going to have adhan now and Salat al-Isha. Jazakumullah khair.